It's Monday night.
I've been in the game a long time. When a catcher catches the ball and it's strike three, you call the guy out. It's that simple, isn't it?
And if it's Monday, it's the knee jerks.
I'm not going to sit here and rip umpires. But you saw what you saw, clearly saw what you saw. I just saw it for the 10th time. Write it and say something once in a while. Have the nerve to say something.
Detroit sports talk with attitude.
Attitude on three. 1, 2, 3. Attitude.
Coming up tonight, will Big Al guess whose birthday it is? Who are the jerks of the week? What will Eno rant about now? The answers coming up next. Two guys who know Detroit sports. The voice of reason, Greg Eno and Big Al Beaton.
It's Sunday, October 6th, 2019. That means it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, who every other Sunday, is the man I like to call, well, the man knows a lot of things about a lot of things. He's a Renaissance man and has a contact list longer than your arm. You know, we can't use Rolodex anymore, Greg, because people don't know what those are. Right. So, and that would be Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog and the Winged Wheeler, amongst other things. Greg, what's up?
Al, I've been meaning to ask you, who joins you on the Sundays that I don't? Or you just fly solo, or what do you do?
No, honestly, but on Sundays where I'm not with you, I am actually more than likely up at the cottage drinking beer. So,
or mowing the lawn. Or
yeah, exactly. Mowing the lawn, doing something with wood, if we're doing repairs, exactly. So you're essentially my break from work.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes.
I am Greg, from Out of Bounds WordPress blog and the Winged Wheeler, which is my hockey blog. I had a piece on the Winged Wheeler this weekend about the what I call the MLB line, Mantha, Larkin, and Bertuzzi. But check me out, my hockey stuff there, which will start to ramp up now that the season started.
Started
kind
this
of dormant
weekend
during the summertime, but I'll be picking up the Winged Wheeler a little bit more now that the season is underway. We've got a docket without. Even though it was a Lions bye week this week, we saw a lot of Lions to talk about. We'll also talk about the Tigers. I think we will get some Red Wings in as well. And follow me on Twitter at Greg. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and on Facebook, facebook.com/the Knee Jerks. But before we get to any of what Al has in store for us, so let's play a little game that we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports, and Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues. He'll receive a $25 gift certificate to Red Barn.
The Red Barn. Oh, my goodness.
Where you can get a Big Barney, fries, and Coke for 67 cents.
Yep. Exactly. Oh, God. I remember one being downriver. I think that was the closest one to me, like Southgate, around the Southgate area. Boy, you have to be, I think, above 45 to remember the damn Red Barn. So
very iconic-looking building. Looked literally like a barn.
Yeah.
And so did the sign. But anyways, okay. This person, Al, made his name in the world of football, I will tell you that. He was born in this state in 1955, so he's 64 years old today. He made his name, I guess, in the game as both on the field in uniform and on the field not in uniform. He was in the game from 1978 in the NFL from 1978 to 2008. In those capacities. He now makes his living in a studio, I will tell you that. And I'll also tell you he's got some Michigan roots on the west side of the state.
I'll try Tony Dungy.
Very good.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. What was the Michigan roots, or?
For some reason, it was the Michigan roots confirmed it, but the timeline was just too perfect for Tony Dungy.
Right.
Because a lot of people forget he was... he was a very, he played in the NFL in the 70s, or late 70s and on. And so it was, I don't know, every once in a while you come up with these questions and they're just there. So I can't explain it.
It just clicks. Yeah, Dungy was one of those guys, Al, who played quarterback in college.
Right.
Was a defensive back with the Steelers, and ended up becoming very. Chuck Noll took him under his wing essentially after he was a player. His playing career was only like 3 years, and took him under his wing and molded him into first a defensive backs coach, and eventually to the point where he was coordinating defenses for the Steelers, no less, for 5 years. And then he went on to become a coordinator with the Vikings, which led to his head coaching gigs in Tampa and in Indianapolis. So now he's on, I believe he's on NBC as an analyst. That's Tony Dungy from Jackson, Michigan.
Yes.
Born in the state of 1955. So happy birthday, Mr. Dungy. And good job for you. And you get $25 worth you can get a lot of big Barneys for $25.
Yeah, I know. I just got to find a Red Barn. It's just, yeah, it's probably next to the Burger Queen and the Jack in the Box and
Burger Chef.
Burger Chef, another one, exactly. All right, with that, let's hit the ground running here. We have, as Greg mentioned, we're going to talk to the Lions, going to talk to the Tigers, and hopefully a little bit of Red Wings. I think we're going to start with the Tigers because the season is over. We're going to do a post-mortem. I really don't know we'll go over a little bit of our thoughts on the season and where this team is heading, but we've been pretty much saying the same things about this team, Greg, for almost 2 years at this point, 2.5 years. This year, they finished 47 and 114. They actually played they only played 161 games as one of their games in Chicago to end the season was rained out. But regardless of that, so instead of ending 54.5 games back, they're only 53.5 games back of first place. The 59 home losses, I think, is probably the most disturbing, Greg. That tied a modern Major League Baseball record of, I think it was the St. Louis Browns back in like the 40s were the last team to lose that many. And I think the most ridiculous thing is in a season where 4 teams broke the record for most home runs in a season. That would be the Twins, Yankees, Astros, and Dodgers. They both all topped 279 or more home runs. I think the record was 269 or something like that. The Tigers hit, like they still played in the dead ball era. They had 149 home runs. They had a team OPS of 682, and they slashed 240, 294 on base percentage, and a 388 slugging percentage. They were just awful offensively. Pitching, Greg, was a little better. I remember at the beginning of the season, I said the Tigers' pitching would be, and I think the exact term was okay. I kind of stretched it out. And for stretches specifically with some of the starters, it was kind of okay. But overall, they still ended up pretty bad. 5.24 ERA, 2.75 batting average against, a whip of 1.46. I mean, you could go deeper into the analytics of this team, Greg, of the stats, but they all show that the Tigers were god-awful. They were worse than the Baltimore Orioles. They were as bad or worse than the Marlins, and this was, in a lot of ways, I think, Greg, a worse season than 2003, even though they had more losses in 2003, because this team was so inept offensively. At least in 2003, you could see some of the guys who were ultimately would play pivotal roles in the 2006 World Series team, like Craig Monroe, Brandon Inge, guys like that were on the team. Santiago and Fonte both went on to have long Major League Baseball careers, and they had Dimitri Young, Bobby Higginson, who were legit Major League ball players. This team, I can understand them being bad because they've gone to fall in this rebuild, but even still, to be this bad twice within a 2-decade period is beyond ridiculous.
You can make the case, Al, that the 2003 team was a little bit better, as crazy as that sounds, for winning 43 games, because they played in a better league.
Yeah.
If you look around the American League in this year, I think there were 4 teams that lost 100 games.
Yep.
The Tigers, of course, the Orioles, the Royals, and
I think the Marlins. Was it a mark?
Well, yeah, it's not 4 in the American League, 4 in baseball, who lost 100 games, but 3 in the American League.
Yeah.
And so when you figure that 3 teams lost over 100 games in one league, in the league the Tigers are in, for them to lose 114.
Yeah.
But they're both bad teams. Don't get me wrong, but they were both bad teams. But relative to the rest of the competition, you're right. You mentioned the home run records. That's one of them. Their offensive slash line was just garish, absolutely garish. An OPS of under 700 for the whole team.
They were below replacement level essentially as a team.
But I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head, because this was the stat that just jumped out at me, which is just absolutely ridiculous, is the 59 home losses. I understand that if you're bad, you're going to lose games everywhere, at home and on the road. I know, but to barely miss losing 60 games. You're losing 3 out of every 4 games you play at home at the big league level is just I don't know. I don't care how bad you are. You're going out there and you're losing 75% of your home games. It's just absolutely atrocious. Now, again, none of these numbers are really going to matter. We hope if down the line this team turns it around and becomes what we want it to be. But the numbers are fresh and raw right now, and I know I get it. In a rebuild, it's not about the present. You're supposed to throw the records out the window. I understand that. You're not supposed to pay attention to because it's not about now. It's about the future. But it's just too bad, Al, that so many people have now lived through, because these were just 16 years apart. You've got 2. I never thought I'd see 2 seasons in my lifetime where the Tigers did not win 50 games. I never, because that whole 2003 season up until this year, I always kind of look back at as like, boy, I'm glad I'll never have to go through that again. Yeah. And for them to almost duplicate that, and again, in some ways, be worse than that, within a 16-year time frame for the Tigers as a franchise, to set that kind of a record, to have 2 teams as a franchise lose, to not win 50 games within 16 years of each other is really
top 5 worst seasons of all time.
Ooh,
2 of them are the Tigers.
That's really bad. Yeah. And again, nobody's going to care. I understand if come 2023, there's a parade down Woodward Avenue. I understand that, and this will be looked at as, remember when they were that bad. But for right now, it's a great baseball city. And I think about the other great baseball cities in this country, like St. Louis, which might be the best baseball city, frankly, in the whole country. They rarely are ever bad. I mean, I can't remember the last time there was a really bad Cardinals team. I remember we had our friend Larry Underwood on, who's a huge Cardinals fan, when we went over the 68 World Series with Larry, and I go back and forth with him on Facebook on occasion, and the Cardinals are just, I wouldn't call them a model of, I wouldn't say they're necessarily a model franchise, but in a way they kind of are, because they're never really down. They never lose. They don't even lose 90 games in St. Louis. A bad year for them might be 500. They're always always in the mix. They've been to a number of World Series in our lifetime, winning a few of them, and that's a great baseball town. And it's a tribute to that franchise that they've never put their fans through what the Tigers have been through, and now we're not even talking about. We could talk about the 119 and 114 lost teams, but don't forget those other 100 lost teams. Yeah. 2002, 2001, 1996, 1975. There's been a lot of them. Really.
And just to drive your point home about the Cardinals, I just brought up their franchise history page on Baseball Reference. They've been under 500 once in this century. Since the last time they were under 500 in let's see here in 2007, and in the last time before that was 1999.
Yeah,
they've always been above 500, and usually winning that 85 to 95 games.
Right. Yeah, they don't always make. They won't always make the playoffs.
Right.
But they're always. Well, you just basically confirmed what I just said. I mean, they're always competitive.
Yep.
It's just that's not easy to do. So that they've got to be applauded for that. for not putting their fan base, which is a very good fan base in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Again, maybe the best, just pure baseball town in America.
But what gets me to kind of talk about this futility that the Tigers are going through. You look at teams like, say, the Athletics, who don't have a portion of the payroll the Tigers we have even right now. They get bad, and then they get good fairly quickly. The Athletics, who made the playoffs this year. Now, they got lost in the wild card, and actually they made the playoffs last year to lose in the wild card. But regardless of all that, they've won 97 games the past 2 years. They were under 5 after making the playoffs in 2014. The A's were under 500, lost around 90 games for 3 years straight, and then they bounced right back, become a playoff team again. I'm sure you could say the same thing about some of the other playoffs, specifically Tampa Bay, for example. These are teams that don't need decade-long rebuilding phases. They managed to turn the ship around in a 2 to 3 year period. And looking at this Tigers team right now, Greg, we're in what? They say year 2. I think it's more like year 3 or so of a rebuild. Yeah. And I don't see this turning around anytime soon, unlike we see with some of these other franchises.
Well, that's what's scary. It's really, really scary. We talked about a little while ago about the 90s, which were the Tigers were mostly totally wandering around.
Yeah, they were in the weeds that entire decade. Remember they were so excited they were in September and got to win a game or two of 500 and how big deal the franchise thought that was. I remember Todd Jones putting his finger up after a save because they were almost 500. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, no, it's. I know things can turn around quickly, but you have to, and I know it. Hey, you have to get lucky. You have to be lucky at times as well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like the thing that makes me a lot concerned actually, is that I just feel like, Al, that you get the feeling, kind of that spooky feeling, that we're being oversold on these kids.
Yeah.
The Kristen Stewarts of the world. Jacoby Jones, who still hasn't yet to really show that he can hit.
Jake Rogers is a big one. He was just completely overwhelmed in September.
You mentioned the show notes. I think you were dead on. Sometimes we don't talk about what you talk about in the show notes, but you mentioned that it's very tricky to, and I agree with you. It's very tricky to put the cachet of your rebuild around pitching.
Yeah,
because it is so mercurial. It's so volatile, and arms can go bad, injuries can happen, and so forth. And look at Fulmer, for example, and so forth. And
Fulmer and Perez are the two poster pitchers for that. And
you just can't. This isn't the 1990s Braves. Okay, where you could roll out these starters, and then it's kind of like football where you have the run, set up the pass. Yeah. You can't do that with baseball. You don't any longer use these big arms to set up your offense. It's all about offense, and the Tigers don't have any offense. They don't have any offense in the big, certainly not the big league level. And I'm not seeing a lot of offense, Al, coming through the system that really gets me excited anyway. And it's not just me. There are people that know way more about this stuff than you and I do, even, who study this up and down, and they're not even that impressed with what they're seeing coming through the system from a position player standpoint. And that's what's frightening.
Because the only guy they're talking about right now is Isaac Paredes, and they don't even know what position he can play yet. And he's at AA.
Yeah, there's nobody, Al. Maybe Riley Green down the line might be that guy.
And he's like 4 or 5 years away.
And maybe next year they draft that Torkelson kid. If they do that with the first overall pick. But again, like you said, that's 4 or 5 years away, and there's nothing coming. There's nothing coming and that's why I don't understand this whole. We'll see in 2021. I don't see 2021 as being realistic. I really don't.
I see it maybe winning less, maybe not losing 100 games, but that's about it. Yeah, because to admit, give us a little bit of positivity to talk about. The pitching, it's really, really risky to build around pitching. I think some of this building around pitching is just the luck of the draw, because their top prospects when they had to be picking were pitchers, like Casey Mize, for example. But even still, they seem to have a young, decent core of pitchers. Despite his struggles with the home run ball, Matt Boyd took a step up this year. Even if not all his stats show it, his advanced peripherals, his metrics show a guy who strikes out a lot of guys. There's stuff there. Spencer Turnbull looks like there's something there, even though, again, these guys aren't particularly young either. Turnbull's like 26. Daniel Norris, as well as he pitched at the end of the year, it was only in 3-inning bursts, which means maybe they found themselves an opener or a long reliever. I'm still not sold on him as a 6-inning starter. Then obviously we got the prospects down at Double-A: Manning, Scuball, Mize, Faedo, obviously Perez, who is still injured. But that is essentially who the Tigers are throwing all their hopes on. And what are the odds, Greg, that every single one of these guys becomes a legit big league pitcher? The odds are that, if they turn out as good as Matthew Boyd, who is realistically a middle of the rotation guy on a good team, he might be a 3 or a 4. There's no guarantee any of these guys are going to be aces because that's the way prospects almost always pan out. Odds are they're not going to be any of these guys are not going to be Justin Verlander. Odds are these guys are going to be more like Matthew Boyd. If that's what happens, the Tigers are in trouble.
Well, yeah, of course. And
the odds are, I'm willing to bet that's the more likely scenario.
That's a more likely scenario. And again, they play in a league that's just filled with big bats. I mean, you look around the league, obviously Houston and the Yankees, and you've got the Rays, which they always seem to somehow figure out a way to win 95 games.
Well, look how the Twins turned themselves around, and they did it by how we wish the Tigers would. They didn't spend a ton of money, but what money they did spend on free agents was very, very smart. And they ended up getting some very valuable bats at reasonable prices, and that won them the division. Yeah,
but they still can't. It doesn't matter how many games they win. They still can't
beat the Yankees.
They just shrink when they play the Yankees in the playoffs.
Exactly.
No.
But that you don't always just have to strip it down to the studs,
right?
And tear down the foundation and build it over there. And this way the Tigers are selling this rebuild, Greg, if there is one misstep, and it's and we could be again, as you said earlier, we could be looking at a 1990 scenario where this team is in the wilderness for over a decade, because that means you got to fire Avila, then you got to get a new front office in, and they have their own way of building things. And who knows how long it is before the team's competitive again. This could get ugly really, really quick if these prospects don't pan out. Because I'm scared to death what this team could look like in a few years.
Well, we saw this year what that kind of a product is going to do for the attendance figures,
to say the least.
There was lots of empty seats. The numbers aren't very good.
I think they said 1.3 million. I bet you if that's tickets sold, if you actually had a head count, I would not be surprised if it was under 1 million.
Well, right, because it's walk-up sales.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're doing well is when you make when you do a lot of walk-up sales.
Yeah.
The day of the game. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of folks showing up who are not season ticket holders who want to get in on the action. And there's so much to do down there where Comerica Park is.
It's a great time.
Right down that corridor. There's tons of bars, tons of restaurants, tons of things to do down there, and people may still be doing those other things, but they're not going to the ball
games. Yeah.
And so that already showed itself this year. And I understand with television money and with the way MLB does profit sharing and it spreads the wealth and so forth with their network TV contracts, I understand that it's hard to lose lots of money. Yeah. But again, I said this before, when you have a losing product on the field, you don't sell as much swag, you don't sell as much stuff. Yep. You don't get the TV ratings, you don't have as many people watching the games.
You don't get the parking, you don't get the concessions, you don't get numerous things.
You don't get the parking.
And this has got it, and they'll have a new Fox Sports Detroit or whoever the new owner is going to name it now. It's not going to be Fox Sports, I'm sure, as of next year. But they got a rights negotiations coming up with that. I mean, the Tigers aren't nearly as valuable TV-wise as they were 5 years ago. I mean, this is going to ultimately hit the Ilitches in the pocketbook and hit them hard if they don't get this turned around.
Yeah, and so I don't pretend to have the solution necessarily. I don't, because I don't, but I do. All I call it, it's kind of like art. I know what I like. I know what I see. Yeah. It's the eye test, and I just don't see. And like again, people who know more about this than I do also don't see anything to get excited about coming up down the pike, and that is. It's one thing to be in the wilderness, like you said, but there's another thing when you can kind of see the light out there, and you can kind of see a clearing up ahead. But from a position player standpoint, unless these guys get better in a hurry, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot coming. And that's so. What does that leave you? I mean, do the Tigers then try to do a quick injection like they did back in 2003 when they signed Pudge and then they eventually signed Maglio and they traded for Guillen? I mean, do they go that route where they just throw money at the problem? I mean, what do you think? I mean, is that
that's the thing, we don't know, because we don't know what Chris Ilitch is going to do, because we know what Mike Ilitch would do. You know, we know he would throw money at the problem. Chris Ilitch, on the other hand, he doesn't seem to have the passion for this team. He's looking at it more pragmatically as a business. We're never going to see a payroll of, we'll probably be lucky to see a payroll of $150 million, let alone over $200 like it was during the Mike Ilitch years. And there is a lot of talk that, I know there was more rumblings over the past couple months that, Ilitch is ultimately going to sell this team because his passions run more towards the Red Wings, and hockey is a much more financially sound business if you don't, because of the salary cap and things like that. So that's the thing. I don't know what this team would do, because I don't know what Chris Ilitch would do. And that's another scary thing, because Ilitch says all the right things. Well, we will spend money when we think the time is right. But when is the time going to be right? If you ask me, they should be thinking about getting some free agents over the next year or so, because like you said, they didn't arrive in 2006 by signing a bunch of guys and all of a sudden winning. They signed Pudge, and then they signed Maglio, and then they started making some trades, and Kenny Rogers and a couple other guys, and then the kids arrived, and all of a sudden, bingo, you had a World Series team. But the groundwork for that World Series team started in the off season of 2003. So, and that's why I think I know the free agent picking is kind of slim right now, at least this offseason, but there's got to be a couple guys that they could sign for 2 or 3 years at reasonable rates, and that would not block anybody and would help this lay the groundwork for this team being competitive 2-3 years down the line, like it was in 2004, 2005. And that's what I'm worried about, is that these guys are not going to spend, Ilitch, Avila, whomever you want to blame, are not going to spend the money till all the youth are here. And so then what the youth won't arrive for another couple of years. And then maybe if they play well, then they'll start thinking about spending. So then we're talking about another 5 years at that point. So by the time they're a playoff contender, and that's when your rebuild stretches to a decade. So that's what I'm afraid of.
Well, you should be afraid of that, and so should all Tigers fans be afraid of that. And this is not, it's not helping Al. This is coming at a time on the Detroit sports landscape where there's not a lot going on. This reminds me of the 70s. There's not a lot going on here. There's no team that's really taking the mantle. There's nobody who's winning really anything right now. This is so much like the 70s. It's not even funny. So that's not helping. Yeah. It's not like they can kind of hide under the umbrella of a successful Pistons team or under a successful Lions team or a successful Red Wings team. They really can't do that. They're just that sore thumb among other sore thumbs that are out there, and so they can't really hide while the other teams kind of give the fans glory. And then the Tigers are kind of like in the weeds, and then there's nothing going on here. There's no real big superstars in any of the 4 teams. There's some good players, but there's no there's no big name guys. There's nobody that really moves the meter nationally. There's nobody you're going to see really in a national standpoint that the national people are talking about. It's so that's not helping everybody's mood right now because there's nowhere to turn. Yep. And baseball is the longest of the seasons. It's the most games. It's the longest from a calendar standpoint, and so it just takes up so much time, and it's just so it's that much more out there when your team's not doing well. You got to go through 162 games of that stuff, and I got to tell you, I hardly watch any games because there wasn't anything to watch.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. They also announced over the past, since the season ended, that there was a shuffling of the deck chairs in the Titanic. In other words, they didn't fire anybody on the coaching staff. So surprisingly, there was no scapegoat. Because if I was going to be laying money, they were going to make Lloyd McClendon the scapegoat because he's the batting coach. But bench coach Steve Little retired, so they just started moving guys around. McClendon's going to be the bench coach. I believe the quality control coach, who essentially comes up with the shifts and things like that, is now going to be the batting coach. And then they switched essentially what Clark and Santiago are now just switching bases. One's going to Clark's moving to first, Santiago's moving to coach third, and again, none of that absolutely moves the meter because these are essentially the same guys who complained that this team does not play with proper fundamentals, but that is their job at this point, to make this team play with proper fundamentals, and they didn't do anything other than just change job descriptions. And I would have thought they might have done more, maybe look to shake things up a little bit. But again, you got to wonder how much of that is Ron Gardenhire saying, I don't want to make changes.
Well, I'm sure that Gardy did not want any of his coaches to be canned.
Yeah.
I understand that for sure. No manager wants that. No manager also does not want to be told to can a coach. That's a no-no. That's a good way to get to create immediate dissension. However, it could have been, I don't know how it would have been very easy to justify canning some coaches when you lose 114 games. But again, this is what's so hard. This is what makes this, Al, the situation so difficult for people like you and me to truly analyze, because it's tempting. The season's just over. It's tempting to talk about this in the now, and we're supposed to be remembering that this is a project that's going to last several years. So ultimately, what happens now doesn't really matter. I mean, what's the difference if they win they won 47 this year? Who cares if they win 55 or 62 next year? I mean, it's not really. It's still not about the win-loss record, and I think that's what drives people crazy. Is we're in a society where everything's based on wins and losses. It's did you win or did you lose? It's not. We're just not. Fans are not wired to think about anything other than wins and losses. And even though you're in a situation where the team's not expected to win, it wasn't. Here's the thing. The fans, I don't think expected them to win this year, but I don't think they expected them to lose as many as they did. And I think that's what kind of threw everybody for a loop. I think they won. I think 64 last year, barely missed losing 100. I think they kind of felt like that was kind of where it was going to be again this year. High 90s. But to lose 114, and they were 18-20 at one point, so they went 29-94 after that. And those are numbers that I can't even wrap my head around. That a big league team, a team in the major leagues, can play 123 games, and win 29. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if you could find a 123 game stretch where the 03 Tigers only won 29 games. 18 for 29 games. I don't know. That's the numbers. Again, I know I'm not supposed to be quoting these numbers because it doesn't really matter, but they were so bad. The numbers were so bad, and I didn't see a lot of there wasn't really anybody in the roster, Al, where you can point to and say, well, at least, okay, yeah, we lost 114, but at least we found out that so and so is a player. At least we found out that we got our third baseman. At least we found out that we got our catcher. At least we found out that we have our right fielder. No, none of those questions were answered. So now what you've done, you put the fans through 161 games of hell, and really nothing really came of it. There was nothing that you can say. Well, at least this person is for sure our right fielder. You can't say that.
Yeah.
There really isn't anybody on this team that you can say, you know what, that person's going to go to spring training next year, guaranteed of a job.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what gets me, as you mentioned, we didn't really find much out when it came to who can play and who can't, because I found it hilarious that this team tried to sell that, we might have found something in Victor Reyes. Victor Reyes was because they made a big deal about hitting 300. He finished the year a little over 300. What did he hit? I think three. Let me bring it up here. Yeah, he hit 304, but he still only had an OPS of 767, which makes him a below-average player. Essentially, Victor Reyes' ceiling is as a fourth outfielder. I mean, he doesn't hit for power, he doesn't walk much, and he's an average at best defensive player. He is not a corner outfielder. If you have to play him any place other than center field, his value tanks. And that gets me also the way they sold Harold Castro this year. Right. Oh, yeah, Harold Castro. We might have found something in Harold Castro. Harold Castro, his OPS was 689. He hit 291, but his on-base percentage was only 305. These are players that their entire value is wrapped up in how high their batting average is. And that is essentially 1970s thinking. That is as anti-analytic as it gets, because there's a guy whose entire value is wrapped up on how high his batting average is. That means odds are he doesn't hit for power. He doesn't walk, and so he doesn't get on base. Like I said, a guy like, for example, Nico Goodrow is likely more valuable because he can take a walk and he has some power. And in today's game and how the game is being shaped, a guy like him is more valuable because he is more valuable offensively because he can create more runs than a slap hitter like Harold Castro, for example, who also is below average fielder. And I think both these guys were around .5 WAR, which means they were replacement level players. And those are like two guys they're selling as, hey, we might have found something in these two. Yeah, you found a couple of backups for a good team. Look at Jake Rogers was awful this year. He had an OPS of under 500, and his defense really didn't show up much behind the plate. What are their big trade acquisitions at the deadline? Travis Demeret. Dawel, he's a 4A player. So was Dawel Lugo. Willie Castro, who was one of the guys we were being sold as a possible future building block. It turns out he can't hit or field. And right. As you mentioned, Kristen Stewart, he is the next Dr. Strangeglove. Yeah. And if you look at the numbers, he is literally below replacement level. He was worth negative WAR this year. I mean, and these are the guys that we were being sold as, well, maybe the first wave of prospects. And let's not even forget Jamer Candelario, who hasn't hit since May of 2018, yet they think, well, we don't think we have a couple guys in the minors who might be able to play third base, so let's put the guy who can't hit at first base, which makes absolutely no sense, because if there is one heavy hitting position on the field, it's got to be first base, and yet Jamer Candelario, who, let me bring up his numbers, who hit, where is it here?
Don't. Don't do it.
But Jamer Candelario, let's see, I may find him here. Yeah, Jamer Candelario hit 203, 306 on base percentage, and he ended up with an OPS of 640. And he's playing first base, a guy of a 640 OPS? That is freaking insane. And the thing is that we still think he's got potential to hit. He's going to be 26 years old next year, and he hasn't hit in a year and a half. So, I am not buying what this organization is selling at this point, especially when it comes to position players. They just don't have any.
No, you're absolutely 100% correct. And the other thing I think that bugs people, Al, and this town is, if they, all they want sometimes is just someone to feel their pain.
Yeah.
That's why the whole Prince Fielder thing went over like a lead balloon, because when Prince came out after the 2013 playoffs, which was gut-wrenching, heartbreaking for the Tigers, and said what he said.
I got kids, man.
Like, it's no big deal.
I got kids.
I have to worry about. Yeah. All the fans want is just somebody to be in the trenches with them, to make them feel like somebody gets it. And the thing that I think drives people crazy, at least it drives me crazy about Chris Ilitch, is I don't feel that with him. Whenever he goes on record, and the last time I heard him was maybe a month or so ago, whenever he goes on record, he comes off canned and synthetic and generic and antiseptic, and he doesn't have any sort of he never says anything remotely like, we know this is unacceptable, we're going to get this fixed as soon as we can. We've got the greatest baseball fans in the world, and they deserve better than this. You'll hear none of that from Chris Ilitch. All you'll hear will be corporate talking points. I think Al Avala's doing a great job. We're making progress. I think we all can see the progress. No, we can't all see the progress.
Right.
He just comes off. He doesn't have. He seems tone deaf.
Yeah.
And that is another thing about. And it doesn't help that he's Mike Ilitch's son. That doesn't help. I understand that.
Yeah, a billionaire that's tone deaf. That's a shocker.
But I mean, But this is a guy, Al, that he's part of the family. I mean, he grew up with Mike Ilitch as his dad. He's been surrounded by this all his life.
Yeah.
And if he's got a different business philosophy than his father, that's fine. That's fine. But he just comes off to me when he does speak in public as just he talks but says nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing of substance of anything that he says. There's nothing that makes you think that we're on the right path, because all he says are these talking points that somebody else must have written for him.
Yep.
And it's just that drives you crazy. And there's just so many things about this that puts people in a bad mood, that go beyond just the wins and losses. But the biggest thing is, Al, there's just nobody to get excited about. You mentioned Candelario. It's not like he's Brooks Robinson at third base to make up for it. No. I mean, it's they moved him to first base. Why? Need I complete that sentence? I mean, so it's just and then you got a broken down Mickey. He's a shadow of his former self. It's just nothing. All these things are happening. Just building and building and building and putting everybody in a really sour mood.
Yeah, it's it pretty much says it all when Brandon Dixon is your top slugger, because he hit 15 home runs. It's absolutely nuts.
You know what, Al? I'd like to. Yeah. I would really like to know, other than the strike-shortened year of 1981, and even then it may not be the 81.
Yeah.
When the last time the Tigers' leading home run hitter had 15 home runs.
God, it would not surprise you if you had to go back to the first dead ball
era. Yeah, you have to go back to Ty Cobb.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine there ever being a year where the Tigers had the leading home run hitter hit 15 home runs.
Yeah. It's especially now in a lively ball era,
right?
Where everybody and their brother is hitting the ball out of the park, and with launch angles, and no one caring about strikeouts, and here we are with a team that leads the league in strikeouts, but also can't hit with power, and that's. I never thought I'd see such a combination, because I could care less a team strike out if they're hitting the ball out of the park, but this team can't strikes out a shit ton and still can't hit the ball. It's, oh my God, it's it's absolutely, the more we talk about it, the more bonkers it seems, that especially when you look at the numbers in front of you. And like I said, they almost look like they belong in a strike-shortened year. With the lack of RBI, the lack of home runs.
Very shortened.
Yeah.
Very shortened.
Yeah, exactly. It's nuts. And then they look at the strikeouts, go, oh, well, wow. So, but it's, hopefully something happens in this offseason to give us at least a little, where we can at least have an idea where we might start to see the end of the tunnel. But right now, I am lacking so much confidence in this front office at this point that, essentially they're not looking. I guess, rather than the Twins, how they actually looked for inexpensive free agent veterans who could improve the team. Avila is looking for inexpensive free agent who he can flip. And that is just a self-perpetuating way of extending their rebuild, because we've said it on the podcast, Greg, since we started. The vast majority of trades were a major league veteran is traded for prospects. The team that gets the veterans win the trade.
Right.
And that still holds true to this day. And there's nothing this team is doing right now that gives me any hope that we're going to see competitive baseball in the next 5 years. I hope to be wrong. I really do, but I don't see, as we sit here today, I don't see it, and I hope there's some sort of movement this offseason that will give us a little bit of hope, because right now this is a bad baseball team whose rebuild just seems to be stuck in the mud.
Absolutely.
And with that, how about we talk about something that's a little more upbeat? And I can't believe we're saying that, because we're going to be talking about the Lions of all teams. We'll get into how upbeat should we be, because since we last spoke, Greg, the Lions are now, let me bring up their numbers here. They're 2-1-1 at the bye. This was the bye. Actually, today was their bye week. It came early this year, but in a lot of ways I think it worked out, because they are somewhat beat up with injuries. Like Matt Stafford, of all people, has a mysterious injury again, and a few other players that they need to get back in the lineup. This is actually, even though it's early, it's probably a good time for it. But the thing is, right now, Greg, the Lions are 2-1-1, and it could be argued that the Lions should be 4-0, but you could make the same exact argument that this team should be 0-4.
Yeah.
But as Bill Parcells once said, you are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
And with the record they are right now, they are definitely considered playoff contenders. They are considered a team who could win the division. They're considered right now a team that could possibly get a home playoff game. And if you would ask me before the season, Greg, if the Lions would be a 2-1-1 record going into the bye week, I would have said you were drinking the Kool-Aid. That Colin Blue and Silver Kool-Aid. And yet here we are. The Lions are at the quarter pole in playoff contention, and they are also playing in what's considered one of the best, if not the best, division in the NFL. But all this optimism is funny, Greg, because it's coming off a loss. And that's kind of where I'm beginning to wonder, is too much being made over a losing effort? And that's where people are like, well, we'll see how they do against the Chiefs. Well, they went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, and they lost. Yet people are more excited about the Lions now than they were when they beat Philadelphia in Philadelphia, which is a pretty decent win in itself. So I'm not sure what to think at this point about a team that, as Bill Parcells says, is they are what the record says.
Well, it's too early. I know we talked a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, let's see how they do against the Chiefs, because the question at the time was, are they better than we've given them credit for? And that was when they were 2-0-1, and I said, let's see how they do against the Chiefs before we make any sort of hint of a judgment. And they played well. I mean, they played well, better than I thought. I thought they'd get blistered. They did a good job. Mahomes didn't throw a touchdown pass.
They made him look human. One of the only team to do it so far this year.
Right, but when push came to shove, Mahomes made the plays that he had to make. converting that fourth down and so forth, and he did what he needed to do to get them into the end zone, and that's all that mattered. And there's no moral victories in the NFL. We all know that. It's all about wins and losses, and they covered the spread. The Lions did in that game, but ultimately they lost, and too many mistakes. You can't fumble at the goal line and have it return 100 yards for a touchdown. I mean, you can't do that. That's a 14-point swing.
Yeah, they fumbled twice within the 5-yard line.
Yeah, you can't do it. And but who are they after 4 games? They're probably a little better. The record is better than I thought it would be after 4 games, but I don't know how good of a team they really are. I'm still not necessarily seeing this great defensive front that I thought we'd see. I'm not seeing it really stuff the run like I thought it would. I think Trey Flowers looks very normal. I don't think he's not not impressing me that much. I'm not seeing that fearsome foursome that I thought we were going to see this year. I think that the secondaries played better than I thought they would, especially with Darius Slay missing the game against the Chiefs. I think the linebacking core is doing okay. I just feel like that they're not getting the quarterback enough. They're not getting enough sacks.
I just wonder if that is that's Patricia's design, in that the thing they don't really have. Say what you will about Trey Flowers, but he is not a big time pass rushing defensive end. I'm kind of wondering, Greg, do you think maybe this, like we said, we see them, they rush only 3 linemen more than any other team in the league. Do you think that, that maybe they're not getting to the quarterback, but they are, since they know, as you just said, the strength of this team is the back 7, that they're playing to that team's strength by putting as many guys in the passing lanes as they can, and playing against the pass that way rather than trying to rush the quarterback, which would affect stats of like Trey Flowers.
Well, I mean, so you're saying it's a scheme kind of a thing.
It's a scheme. Yeah, they're not schemed to get sacks. They're schemed to confuse quarterbacks in the passing game.
Well, okay. I mean,
that's a theory. I don't say that's exactly what they're doing.
No, I understand that. And the bottom line is they did make Mahomes look human, like you put it.
Yeah.
And they have, they made Phillip Rivers look human. Made him throw a game-ending interception in the Chargers game. And the opening week against Kyler Murray, well, that was inexcusable as far as I'm concerned. That fourth quarter.
But they made him look utterly lost for 3 quarters until that game fell apart.
Right. And then the game against the Eagles, the Wentz, there was just a lot of drops. The Eagles had a lot of drops in that game, including the very end of the game. But hey, it's the quarter pole, and it's a pretty good division. Everybody's over 500. The Packers destroyed the Cowboys today.
Yeah, Packers won again today, and the Vikings, even though they're in disarray, they still have a winning record. I think they've only lost 1 game.
No, I think they're 3-2. I think
3-2.
I think
take a look. See.
I think the Bears are 3-2. The Lions are 2-1, and the Packers are 4-1. So it's a good division.
Yeah, you're right. The
it's a good division, and so we'll see. But they ran the ball effectively against the Chiefs. Of course, the Chiefs don't have a great run defense, but they ran the ball effectively against the Chiefs. And it's just going to come down to. We'll let this thing play out. I don't think I'm not sold on them. I probably won't be sold until the very last week of the season, and they've won the division. But they're just they are opportunistic, which is good. Cause a lot of fumbles.
Yeah.
But that comes and goes. You can't rely on that. That's not.
Yeah, you can't rely on turnovers because they tend to be kind of fluky anyway.
Right.
But. Yeah, but it is funny to see how the fan base is more fired up over this team losing a game than they were winning a game. But that's kind of like this upside-down world we're in right now with the Lions potentially being a good team. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think there's one thing to be encouraged about, at least in my mind, Greg, is that Darrell Bevell, the new offensive coordinator, has actually impressed me more than anything else with this team because – before the season, we were being told, oh, yeah, he's coming in here. They're going to pound the running game. They're going to run. Yet under Bevel, Matt Stafford is having a bit of a renaissance season this year after looking awful, being neutered by Jim Bob Cooter last year with his constant nickel and diming. Stafford is averaging 8 yards an attempt. He's averaging 12.8 yards per completion, and those would, if over a full season, those would be career highs. His passer rating through 4 games is 102.5, which is also a career high over a full season. And what's more impressive, because it's always about average, how far down the field you're throwing, and the further the ball goes, the better the team usually is. And Stafford's passes are traveling through the air at an average of 11.1 yards, which is second in the NFL. Stafford has also thrown the ball deep 31 times. That's 20 or more yards downfield, which is more than anybody in the league, even Mahomes, who's known to be throwing the deep ball. And what's also impressive with this offense, Greg, is that they're actually spreading the ball around. 5 receivers have catches of 30 or more yards. 4 different receivers have 100-yard receiving games. So, and as you said, the running game still seems to be a work in progress, but it looked like it started to come alive in the Kansas City game where Kerryon Johnson actually had 100 yards rushing, his first one this year. So, if there's anything I think really enthused about so far with this team that I'm starting to get sold on is that Darrell Bevell appears to know what he's doing.
No, the play calling I will say has been pretty much on point. I liked the fourth down, going for it on fourth down, and against the it wasn't on fourth down. It was a third down play against the Chargers where they iced the game with a pass. Yeah, put that game on ice. I think that I've seen some creativity. I've seen some good play calling. You mentioned the Jim Bob Cooter scenario and how that affected Stafford, but he's got some good receivers. I mean, he's got Galladay and he's got Jones and he's got Hawkinson and he's got. I've been impressed with some of the secondary tight ends like Jesse James and that other. I can't remember the other guy's name. This McKissick. I like this McKissick.
Yeah,
guy.
The new running back.
Out of the backfield, he kind of takes that role that Theo Riddick had of catching the ball out of the backfield and making something out of nothing, and so they got some guys that can catch the ball, and Stafford for the most part with the exception of fumbles, he still fumbles a lot. Has for the most part has been pretty good with the football, protecting the football, not too many turnovers, nothing crazy bad. Bevel, so far so good. I'd like to see the offensive line create a little bit more holes for the running game, but they did a great job against the Chiefs. Right. So we'll see, but they seem like they have a little bit of depth at running back. And they're just the offense has just been and I have had some issues with their fourth quarter play calling, especially in those earlier, specifically the Arizona game where they literally looked like they went into a shell. We've talked about that, where they seem to sometimes want to take the air out of the football and run the clock, when in this league it seems more prudent to put your foot on the neck and score more. Right. But other than that, it's the offense is actually entertaining to watch, and it wasn't that at all last year, especially in the second half of the season when the wheels came off. That offense last year was just absolutely an eyesore. It hurt to watch that the Lions offense try to do anything. And say what you will about Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford, if you have a choice between Matt Stafford, game manager, and Matt Stafford, gunslinger, give me gunslinging Matt Stafford every damn time, because that's his wheelhouse. You got a guy with a cannon for an arm. It just seems like silly not to throw the ball deep, and I think Devil has realized that, and that he's trying to keep Stafford's mistake-prone tendencies to a minimum, but still allowing him to take those deep shots because it makes perfect sense, as you said, with those wide receivers in his arm. Well, just like we were talking about how baseball is a home run hitting, pinball machine game nowadays. Well, the NFL is a passing game. Yeah, it's a passing game. I know you want to run the football. I get it, but it's a passing game. It's a passing league. It's been for a number of years now. And if you've got, like you mentioned, if you've got a guy like Stafford who has the arm strength that he does, and he can, and not just the arm strength, but the ability to put balls in tight windows.
Yeah.
And really.
Yeah, he had a couple of passes against Kansas City that were just thrown through a mail slot.
Yeah, and I know there was I think it was against the Chargers where even Matt Patricia said, I'm not sure if Marvin Jones caught it or just stuck to his body because he's throwing these lasers and you know. The receivers haven't really been dropping the football. I mean, we have not seen a lot of drops. Really haven't. Certainly nothing that's been like a back-breaking drive killer. You know, you saw what happened to the Eagles when the Lions played them with the drops. The Lions have not had the receivers have not had the dropsies. They catch the football. I think Hawkinson is a huge addition to that offense, and that he fits in real well with what Bevel likes to do. He likes to
Bevel loves
tight ends. He loves to use tight ends in the passing game, and I've been watching Hawkinson closely when he's not catching the football. He can block. He is as advertised as a blocker. I've seen him make some. He's like a sixth offensive lineman on the. I mean, the way he can block in the gaps. He can almost like do trap blocking. He's really he's like a second tackle on the end of that line, and so he is as advertised as far as the blocking aspect of it, and certainly he can catch the football and he's got this athleticism. He is as advertised, and he as well, Al, is the type of tight end that the NFL likes as well. I mean, he's that he's not. You know, gone are the days of the Mike Ditka type tight ends. Right. Now we've got these very athletic, taller. You know, the tight ends are just they're just these.
They're giant wide receivers.
Yeah, right. They're like these amalgams, if you will, of the speedy receiver and the guy and the tight end, big guy who can catch the ball and big targets, and the offense seems to be starting to find its way a little bit and getting a little bit of a rhythm. Yeah. So you know that's encouraging.
Yeah, it's very encouraging, and hopefully it continues because the Lions are finally going to start having some division games coming up. I think 3 of the next 4 are games against the teams in their division. Obviously, we've talked about the 5-game stretch where against playoff caliber teams. There's 2 games left in that stretch, and that's the Packers next week, and then the Vikings after that. And then I believe they play the Bears, I think, twice in November. So the second half of the season is going to have a lot of division play, and that's where you got to make your hay if you want to make the playoffs. So it's and this game against the Packers for all the. I know there was a lot of Lions fans out there saying, the Packers, we've dominated the Packers over the past couple of years because I think the Lions have won the last 3 games against the Packers, and Aaron Rodgers is 35, getting old, and not what he used to be. Yet here we are, the Packers are at the top of the division, as almost always, at 4-0. Lions are behind them, and they're going to be in Lambeau. At least the weather should be halfway decent, considering the time of year. But if, as always, the road to the division crown in the NFC North always seems to run through Lambeau. So I think you want more people to buy in if the Lions are real. Beat the Packers in Lambeau. And I don't want another moral victory like this Chiefs thing was. Win a game or win some of these games. I'm not asking this team to go. It would be 14-1-1. Win double digits, make the playoffs, get a playoff home game. Then I might actually be sold on Matt Patricia as a coach and Bob Quinn as a GM. I'm not willing to. I know we're both in the same boat because we've been burned so many times by this team.
Right.
Start winning some of these games that were moral victories in the past. Right. And then, maybe then I will hop fully on the bandwagon and kind of walking next to it instead.
Right. No. Right. Exactly. Go into a tough stadium in December and win a road game. Yeah. Knock off a division leader late in the season. I mean, that kind of thing. Is you're right. That's very quietly. I think very quietly, I think the Lions are like 7-7 against the Packers in the last 14 games, which, kind of is, you can kind of goes, it really could have been more than that if they would have won that, there's that Hail Mary game in 2015. Right. So they've held their own against the Packers. They've even won a couple on the road there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a very difficult division. They got a lot of good teams in it. I mean, you're absolutely right. I couldn't said it better than myself. Turn those moral victories into real victories, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, exactly. It's we're seeing encouraging signs, but I'm not ready to dive in with both feet. I'm just putting my toe in the water at this point. So.
Right.
All right, let's hit the home stretch here, Greg, since we'll have a lot more Lions talk on the next show, because at that point, by the next show, we'll have 2 division games to talk about, but with the Packers and Vikings. So that should be very interesting, considering obviously the Packers are playing well, and the Vikings, even though they have a winning record, are in big-time disarray. I mean, when you have your quarterback apologizing to your star wide receiver for not getting him the ball enough, it's getting weird in Green Bay, and I should say in Viking land right now. All right, as we are talking, I think I'm going to turn that game on right now, as a matter of fact, here as I look to my right. Oh, let's see how the Red Wings are doing, because they are playing as we are recording, Greg.
Mantha's got a hat trick.
Yeah, actually. Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, it's 3-3 in the third period, and it's actually game 2 as we're talking right now. Opening night was last night, Saturday night. I was recording this on later on a Sunday night, and going by all predictions, going by everything I've read, going by my eyes over what I've seen over the last couple of years, this team is not going to be a playoff team. They are expected to contend for the first overall pick in the 2020 draft rather than compete for a playoff spot. But, unlike the Tigers, who are also rebuilding, the Red Wings seem to have started to develop a young core who are more than just role players. These guys look like not just fourth line guys, but look like they're finally starting to find some first and second line guys. Specifically, now they have, as you call the top line, as you call it, the MLB line of Mantha, Larkin, and Bertuzzi, who essentially dominated that game, the opening night against the Predators on Saturday. Larkin had a goal and an assist. Mantha had a goal and 2 assists. And Bertuzzi, who was really come out of nowhere over the past year, had 2 goals and 2 assists. I believe that tied a Red Wings record for most points in the first game of the year, opening night or whatever. So they beat the Predators 5-3. And, as we talked about the Tigers, Greg, that we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, I can kind of see one with the Red Wings, starting with, obviously we've talked about the Steve Yzerman effect. They actually have a guy who has built a winning team running the team now, but also the fact that they have a top line who looks like, really something to build around. They have Grand Rapids. They got, I'm not arguing with how they're using guys, how they've sent guys like Veleno and Rasmussen and Zadina, guys like that at Grand Rapids right now, because they're all still around 20 years old and need to ripen a little bit. So I have no problem keeping them at Grand Rapids right now. But these are all first-round picks. I mean, and then you got a few surprises who are working out, like Bertuzzi for one. Philip Hronek, who's starting to look like maybe he might be that first or second pair defenseman that this team desperately needs someone to break out and become. He looks like he might be one of those guys, finally, after years of looking for someone who, someone on the defense who is not just a number three pairing kind of guy. So this team seems to have a plan. They seem to be sticking to the plan, and there is enough talent on this team, Greg, young talent, that even if they don't win a lot, they're going to be interesting. And I think that's, at this point of a rebuild, that's all I can really ask for. If you're not winning, at least be fun and interesting. And right now, the Wings are fun and interesting. And, even if they do end up with another top 5 draft pick, if they continue to develop players the way they have been, I'm not it really looks like they'll be on the right track.
Absolutely on the right track. I think that I wrote a piece over the weekend about the Mantha, Larkin, and Bertuzzi line, and one of the things I mentioned was what you just said about there being light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And it's not the proverbial oncoming train. It's there really is light at the end of the tunnel. You've got some kids who can play. This line is. This aforementioned line is, they're all young and they bring different things to the table. They seem to really enjoy playing with each other. They have a chemistry now, and going into tonight's game, in which Mantha has 3 goals as we speak, they had scored 47 points in their previous 9 games. That line over 5 points a game. And a lot of the Red Wings are 7-2 in those 9 games. So obviously, how that line goes, so do the Red Wings, and that's fine. I understand that the rest of the league is going to game plan to put their top defensive line against the Mantha, Larkin, Bertuzzi line. No problem with that. So it's going to be up to the other 9 forwards on any given night to try to pick up the slack. And the thing, if you look at the roster, there's the Red Wings have a number of players, forwards, who have had their moments in the sun offensively, but those moments unfortunately are kind of in the past. Because a lot of these guys are well into the 30s. The Val Filppolas of the world, Darren Helm, Abdelkader, Franz Nielsen. All these guys are, on the wrong side of 30, and so their best days are more than likely behind them. But at the same time, you do have to have – it's nice to have those veterans on the roster who can pop in a goal every once in a while.
Right, and they're also, for the most part, clustered on the 3rd and 4th lines.
Right. Now, Glenn Denning, hit the game, which turned out to be the game-winning goal last night. Was a very good effort. He was harassed all the way down the right wing, and still managed to get off a really good shot. I didn't think the Nashville goalie played a particularly good game last night, but that's okay. They just really, they have, like you said, a plan. There's a definitive plan. They've got clearly the Red Wings scouting department and player development people have always been light years ahead of the Tigers. That's been going on for years in their respective sports, and clearly you can see that happening once again. They seem to be able to. They're finding these youngsters who are developing. They're not going to hit on all of them for sure. Right. Whoever remember Xavier Ouellet, whatever happened to him.
Yeah. But you need some lower picks to hit, and in Bertuzzi and Hronek, it looks like they have.
Right, exactly.
They're not first-round picks.
Correct. And then you've got guys like and you do have the upper round picks like the Chalowskis of the world,
right?
Which, trying to find their way and was sent down to the minors after he kind of was losing his way a little bit. And
I remember we had a whole discussion about how that was handled last year.
Right. And now he's back. And at the NHL level, and so it's. Strangely enough, the defense is still a work in progress, but I do like the additions they made there. But strangely enough, I really think goaltending. Jimmy Howard's 35; he's going to be 36 before the season's over with.
Yeah.
He's not a great goalie; he's a good goalie. It might be good enough for this team right now, but I think for them to take the next step out in this rebuild, we were talking about in baseball, we were talking about the pitchers and the position players. Sooner or later, they're going to have to get a goalie. They're going to have to get a number one goalie who's going to be the guy when the team does make the playoffs on a more consistent basis, and is going to have to be the guy who's going to have to win a series or two for them. Right now, they don't have one. They don't have one, I don't think, in Grand Rapids. I don't know enough about the goaltending depth below that to know where they may have.
And goaltending, much like pitching, is very hard to predict. I mean, a guy could come out of nowhere, but you're right. The Rings goaltending in Howard and Bernier they're old and average.
Right, exactly. You look around the league, Al, and everybody in the league's got a save percentage of .905.
Yeah,
I mean that's just everybody has that.
Yeah.
You got it's finding those guys that have save percentages of .925. Yeah. Those are the guys that are really can lead you in. But you're absolutely right. Especially in hockey. I mean, especially in the playoffs. If you find a guy who he can be a .905 guy, but gets hot
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about being hot. It's all about being hot at the right time. I understand that. But I'm just saying that in general, they're going to have to find – in general, they're going to have to find a goalie to replace Jimmy because Jimmy's not going to be able to play forever.
Right.
And so, and Bernier is Bernier, and they're going to have to find somebody else. You and I thought at one time that Mrazek was that guy.
Yeah.
And he just never took that next step. If anything, he took a step backward.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, you're absolutely correct. Goaltending is very mercurial, very volatile. That's true. And I know that not everybody can have a Vezina winner on their squad, but I'm just saying that's the one you can kind of see that one coming. The goaltending situation sooner or later. Right now, it's not as big of a deal because the team is still in the rebuild mode and they're not expected to do much. But sooner or later, you're going to look cross-eyed at the guy in the net. And right now, it's Jimmy's okay. But he's not great, and he's not. Right. He never really was. But I mean, he's good enough for this team for where they are right now. But sooner or later, they're going to have to find a goalie. But that's Yzerman will figure it out. He always seems to figure it out. He figured it out in Tampa, and I'm sure he'll figure it out in Detroit. But that's something that they got to work on.
Yeah, because I think right now their top prospect at goalie is Philip Larson. And I said to bring it up because I was trying to remember who was at Grand Rapids right now. And it's Philip Larson. And he was a sixth-round pick, but he played well at the University of Denver, and now he's the top goalie in Grand Rapids. And he's kind of now their hope for the future at goalie. If they're hoping he can step up, because after that, you're right, I have no idea what they have when it comes to goalie. But, yeah, that could become a sticking point. And remember, we both agreed it made sense to lock Howard up to a 2-year deal when they gave him that extension last year. But even at 2 years, that shows he is not the future of this team between the pipes, and they need to find that guy. Is it going to be Larson? Is it going to be Bernie? Who the hell knows? But there's no surefire goalie in this system right now, and that could become an Achilles heel for this team down the line. But again, we're talking a few years yet before we really have to talk about who's gonna, who's the next Chris Osgood for this franchise, and who it's again too early to show. But at the very least, as we're saying, I'm liking what I see of this team. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but lose and be entertaining in a rebuild. That's all I'm asking for. And the Red Wings, I think, are going to do that. But I guess the other thing we will have to wonder about is how the Red Wings coaching status. What is going to happen with Blashill, considering he is not Steve Yzerman's guy? Is he going to be able to do enough? Because he's in his 4th season now, or is this his 5th season?
This is his 5th season, believe it or not.
Yeah, and that is a long time for a coach to be in one place
and not make the playoffs.
Right. So
right.
I have to wonder, what does Steve Yzerman want to see from Jeff Blashill this year? Because this team is likely not going to make the playoffs. So what is Yzerman looking for with his essentially, with his coach who, he's under contract, but you can still kind of call him a lame duck because Yzerman didn't hire him. So I'm kind of wondering where this team is with Jeff Blashill, and not making the playoffs, because that doesn't happen in pro sports much, where a guy, as you said, is in one place that long and has not made the postseason.
Well, to be fair to Blash, on whose case I've gotten in the past, he really has. I mean, if you look at the main guys, if you look at Larkin, Athanasiou, Mantha, Pertuzzi, it's all. Of course, those are all forwards. If you look at those players, they really have gotten better since with Blashill as the coach. They have, unlike, I thought there were some players that kind of stalled, Nyquist and Tatar.
Yeah, the previous wave, the next wave. Yeah, you're right.
But I think that you can look at these names I just said and say, they're getting better. They're trending better for sure. And if you're going to criticize Blash for the other, you gotta give him some credit. You can't have it both ways. You got to give him credit for that. If you choose to give him criticism on the other, then you have to give him credit on the other side. Yeah. So But I think, that's a good question. That's an interesting question about what Yzerman would be looking for. I guess it would be just improvement. I mean, I think you're at the point now, Al, where it's about improvement. It's no longer, but yes, it's a rebuild, but it's a few years now with no playoffs, and so I think this would be now the way they finished the season last year was good.
Yeah,
they won a 6-game winning streak at the very end of the year before.
And just like this on the back of that one line, essentially.
Yeah. So and they're going to have to, but then you have to look at but the flip to the Blashill situation, Al, and you and I have also kicked this dead horse is the veteran thing. The way he handles veterans maybe versus the way he handles the younger players. Certain players have not gotten better. Right. Abdicator for sure.
Right.
Has gone on the toilet ever since he signed that big contract. I don't know what to make of that. Maybe that's not fair to put that on Blashill. I don't know.
Yeah, that might just be a 30-year-old plus player in decline, but it's hard to say.
I mean, he was a guy I thought Abdicator who would be the next captain. I thought he had just next captain written all over him. Mm-hmm. I was all in on signing him to that big. I wanted the Red Wings to lock him up. Full disclosure, I was all in on that, and I did not think that he would go completely in the toilet. I mean, completely in the toilet like he has. It's not gotten a lot of, frankly, if this team was maybe a little better or if there was more of a focus on their success or non-success, the fans would be riding him out of town. Yeah. But the way that where the Red Wings are right now in their development, it's almost like the Abdicator kind of gets a pass. He doesn't really get a lot of, he doesn't get a lot of vitriol from the fans, despite a complete lack of production since he signed the contract. Yeah. But there's a lot. It's no longer about him anyway. He's not the future. It's about these other guys we're talking about. But it would be nice, though, Al, if the guys like Abdicator would be Abdicator. I mean, if he was the Abdicator,
it doesn't have to be the 25 goal scorer, but a guy who can give you 15 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a presence on the ice. That's the thing I don't like about him.
Right.
It's not just about his goals and his point production is down. It's not just that. He's not a presence on the ice like he used to be.
Right.
He used to be, to me, he was somebody that even if he didn't score that night, you knew he was there. He made his presence known, whether through a hit, through something. You just knew he was there. He was just one of these guys that was. He could be an agitator if he had to be. He was in the mix. He was always getting under people's skin. And I don't see his. If you're not going to get the points, then still be that hard guy to play against, and he's not that. And that's what irritates me about him is that
be a new grind line type.
Exactly. He doesn't have an identity. He used to have an identity, Al.
Yeah.
And it's like as soon as he signed that contract, he lost his identity. Yeah. And he doesn't have that anymore. And he's just, to me, he's just another guy out there. And he to me contributes very little to the overall cause here. And if it wasn't for the big contract, you can't trade him. 4
more years of that contract.
You can't trade him. I mean, he's not tradable.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's been like 2 years now of this in a row of just complete lack of production and a loss
6
of
goals last year. I mean, that's unacceptable. I mean, we're not asking for 20. Give us double digits at least. And as you said, be an irritant on the ice. And you're right. That guy set sail a long time ago at this point.
Yeah.
But it's at the very least, I think we're going to have at least more. The Wings are going to give us plenty, I think, to talk about this upcoming season, just from some entertaining play and what they got going on in Grand Rapids and here. And that, as we said, there seems to be talent starting to form with this organization. Like, remember Ken Holland saying, rebuilds could take up to 10 years. This one doesn't look like it's going to take quite that long.
If you do it poorly, it can.
Yeah, exactly. So at least we're starting to see the fruit of some of these high draft picks and developing some of the talent. And as we said, they've gotten guys like Larkin and Bertuzzi and Heroic are playing above their draft status is what you need for your team to rebuild quicker than expected. So, and they're getting some of that. So, all right, Greg. With that, let's hit the as they would say in horse racing, down the stretch we go. And let's get our jerk of the week. So who is your jerk of the week?
My jerk of the week, and I feel like I've said this before, so I apologize to the folks if this has been a jerk of the week that I've said in the past, but it's Fox Sports Detroit. And the reason why is I am so tired of these announcer contests. With the Tigers, it was
pick the stick, and
now with the Red Wings, it's the I don't even know what they call it. Light the light or light the lamp or whatever.
Light the lamp. That's it.
Where they've got this convoluted score. Now they got a convoluted scoring system. You get X amount of points if a defenseman scores, and X amount of points if a defenseman gets an assist. X amount of points if a goalie gets a shutout, or if the team gives up 1 goal or 2 goals. It's complicated. Number one. Number two, I don't care. I feel like I'm watching some sort of I'm watching these guys have an inside party with each other, of which I'm not invited. I could care less if Larry Murphy has a good night with his pick, and or Mickey has a good night, or Keating has a good. They're not. It's not about them.
Yeah.
It's not. They're making the broadcast about them. And that's what drives me crazy about this pick the stick thing with the baseball and with this hockey thing. I don't know if I can't remember if the Pistons announcers.
I don't know. I don't know how you would. If they do. We'll probably find out soon because exhibition season starts tomorrow for the Pistons.
You should not inject yourself that much into the broadcast. There's enough already. First of all, they already have enough guys on the broadcast. You've got 3 guys in the studio, 2 guys in the booth, and then a guy on the ice. You got 6 guys on every given night, because you got Trevor doing the interviews on the ice or in the dressing room, and then you've got the post game thing, which you got to have him. I understand that. You got the 2 guys in the booth, and you got the 3 guys in the studio. So you got 6 guys already, and now what they're doing is they're taking those 6 guys and they're injecting them. As part of the broadcast. I don't care. I want to watch.
And it's even worse with baseball because they could take an entire half inning just talking about the damn draft. You know what? Enough. I know they're not going to stop because it's sponsored. It's another way to get money because everything is sponsored. You can't read anything without there being a sponsor. Right.
And I know I'm fighting a losing battle here, but it doesn't mean that I have to like it. And I just think it's Bush. I just think it's Bush to inject your broadcasters that much into. I just don't. I think it's. I don't like it, and so my jerk of the week is Fox Sports Detroit.
You know what? My best way to compare the pick the stick and light the lamp stuff to is someone talking about their fantasy team.
Yes,
and I hate that.
Right.
I don't care about your fantasy team, and you're right. That's exactly what this is. It's essentially a nightly fantasy draft, and the last thing I care about is someone's fantasy team. I hate people who talk about their fantasy team. And I'm no longer that guy. So, but yeah, that's a good one because that really does. It wastes time in the pregame and it wastes time during the game, and then they talk about it after the game. It's ridiculous. I'm with you there. All right, my jerk of the week. I was kind of wondering where it was going to go, but then it got cemented when I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on with Sports Illustrated right now, Greg.
A little bit.
Yeah, and that the new owners of Sports Illustrated, because Time, once was Time Warner, the big magazine conglomerate.
Right.
They sold off Sports Illustrated a few months ago to essentially one of those Tom Gore's led venture capitalist type groups.
Right.
And they are gutting the magazine. I guess on Friday they laid off half the magazine and website staff. And from everything I've read about it, and actually Deadspin has been really up to date on what's going on with SI, is that they are essentially they're trying to make it, they're turning Sports Illustrated, essentially the company who bought it is called Maven, and they bought it for the brand. because Sports Illustrated is one of the best-known brands in sports journalism. But they're going to gut the whole thing, and essentially they're going to become a content mill. And essential of what I've read is that they're going to turn Sports Illustrated into something like SB Nation, with a bunch of different fan sites and paying people next to nothing for a shit ton of work. Trust me, how I know these things from my years at SB Nation, and where I got paid next to nothing for churning out a ton of work, and that's the direction Sports Illustrated is going through, and they're getting rid of all the good journalists over there, and it's a damn shame because I've had a Sports Illustrated subscription pretty much for the vast majority of my adult life. Hell, my first Sports Illustrated subscription I got when I was like 7 or 8 years old as a gift from my grandmother, and I've had a subscription to them pretty much ever since. But to see what's happened to this magazine, Greg, for back in the day where it was thick and it was weekly and it had some of the best sports feature writing on the planet.
Oh, no, without question.
And and that's where that's where you used to read guys like Frank DeFord and
Peter Gammons and
yeah, exactly. And now now it's a bi-weekly, and it's a little thicker than a pamphlet at this point.
Right.
And what used to be that if you were a sports writer, the peak of your profession was writing for Sports Illustrated.
Of course.
And now Sports Illustrated is going to ultimately turn into a Kodak, a Polaroid, a Westinghouse, essentially a brand name that means nothing, and they're going to be owned by a company that is just going to churn out shit content just to get clicks.
Right.
And just and crap video, and it won't be a site worth visiting at all. And it's a damn shame to see it happening. And this is not the only one. Remember, Inside Sports, Sports Magazine, The National, all the sports. I mean, the Sporting News.
Right.
These are all things I used to have subscriptions for.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna let my Sports Illustrated subscription last because who knows? It may even fold before that time because I think it's still got another year left on it. But it's a damn shame to see what's happening. And at this point, Greg, about the only place left to get any kind of decent long-form sports journalism is The Athletic, because and they came up with this weird thing saying you have to pay for our content. And the thing is, though, I have a membership with The Athletic, and their content blows everything out of the water, even the newspapers. So, unfortunately, that's what's happening. People stop buying magazines. The Sports Illustrated's website was always behind at times. It was far behind sites like ESPN.
Right.
But just to see what's happened to it and how these ghouls are just going to gut it for the name, I'm showing my age, but there's a couple generations that just don't realize how influential Sports Illustrated once was, and to see what's happening to it now, it's I guess it's just a sign of the times.
Yeah,
so that's my jerk of the week. No, people who are gutting Sports Illustrated.
No, it's good. It's just another nail in the coffin of what used to be. Print journalism, of course, has been under fire for years.
Yeah, we could do a whole thing about this.
Now you can't even. It's the online thing is difficult now to even maintain any sort of dignity there or any sort of reputation there. But you're absolutely right. There was a time when that was the Sports Illustrated writers were absolutely the best of the best. Rick Tellender and Bob Ryan, and I could go on. And now you mentioned DeFord, and of course the photography was just through the roof. The best sports photography in the world.
And when you got it, and when say like your team won the World Series, you got that, you got Sports Illustrated, and you kept it, as a memento.
And there's you don't have such a thing called a Sports Illustrated cover jinx if you're not something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. I forgot about that. Yeah.
You don't. Nobody cares about you. I mean, you wouldn't have a jinx about a magazine nobody cared about that wasn't relevant. And obviously, Sports Illustrated, being on the cover, it was like being on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Yeah,
being on the cover of Sports Illustrated was always a big deal. And I was like you. I had Sports Illustrated when I was an adolescent. In the mid to late 70s. Sports Illustrated came to I was so excited when they would come to my mailbox every week, and I got the hockey news back when the hockey news was like a tabloid.
Yeah, there were Baseball Digest. It was another one.
Sporting News. When Sporting News was a tabloid on newsprint, I got that.
And remember, it had a week's worth of box scores. In the sporting news.
I mean, unfortunately, I get it. Those days are gone. I understand that, but as you were talking, I was reading up more about what happened there, the way that the layoffs went down, and these people who these poor people who just were twisting the wind during that day, and these are it's just. I don't know. I don't know, Al, what's going to happen. You mentioned the Athletic. I don't know what's going to happen.
That's about it at this point. And they're propped up by venture capitalist money at this point. I don't know if they're turning a profit yet.
I guess what I'm concerned about, and of course I have this hits home to me because I do a lot of writing, is I wonder how much good writing is appreciated anymore. I mean, I wonder how much of it do the younger fans, if you will, truly appreciate reading something really, really good versus just reading something on their way from the office to lunch or
the difference between a feature-length article and a blog post, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much content out there, but so much of it isn't very good. And I just wonder if there's really if anyone's really noticing the difference anymore between something that's really good and something that isn't really good.
And that's the thing is that because the newspapers are being disemboweled as well. Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things I noticed during the last month of the season, the Free Press stopped sending their beat writer on the road. For the Tigers, for example, Anthony Fennick, they were not printing Fennick articles; they were printing wire service articles that were recaps of the game. So, which tells me they didn't want to spend the money to send their beat writer on a road trip, and that to me that's unfathomable for a big city newspaper to start doing stuff like that. But that's become par for the course. We're not seeing the same kind of writing we are in newspapers either. At this point,
right?
It's I hate to use the term clickbait, but that's what a lot of the stuff we're seeing now is.
Yeah.
But when newspapers stop, like MLive, which essentially used to be what the Ann Arbor News and some of those other newspapers, that was their entity. They have, I think, one beat writer that covers both the Red Wings and Pistons because they don't want to pay for a second one, for example, and they don't send that beat writer on the road either. I mean, that is bonkers to me that. This is a big league city with 4 big league teams and 2 Power 5 college teams.
Yeah.
And we have newspapers in this town that don't give them the coverage they deserve because they don't want to spend the money or they force guys out because they become too expensive, like Tom Gage, who was the beat writer at the Detroit News for years. And he didn't want to leave the news, but he had to take a forced retirement. So and then they replace him with a hack like Chris McCoskey. But, that's another whole story anyway. But regardless of all that, Greg, I guess I could change my jerk of the week to people who have turned sports journalism into clickbaity crap, I guess. I don't know. But let's get the hell out of here before we rant for another 15 minutes on the death of writing. And why don't you get out the thank yous and plugs and all that fun stuff?
Sure, but before I do that, I want to give props to Anthony Mantha for scoring 4 goals tonight.
Oh, he got the game winner?
Yeah, he sure did.
All right.
With less than a minute to play. I mean, wow. Unbelievable.
In the middle, he must have scored during my rant. God damn it. So,
according to a tweet by Ansar Khan, who's been on the show, by the way, years ago, but Mantha with his first 4-goal game, with the first 4-goal game for our Red Wings since Johan Franzen scored 5 in Ottawa in 2011. So hats off, literally, to
Maybe
Anthony
we're finally
Mantha.
getting that breakout season from Mantha. As long as he doesn't get into a fight and break his hand again.
Right. So good job there. I just want to once again read me at my WordPress blogs, both of them, Out of Bounds, and my hockey stuff at the Winged Wheeler. Now that the season's going, you'll be seeing more hockey stuff out of me. At Greg Eno is the Twitter account, and at the Knee Jerks is the Knee Jerks Twitter account. And we'll be back with you on the 20th of October. I texted last time you told me about you reminded me that Eastern Michigan's football team, which laid at Egg, by the way, in Mount Pleasant Saturday, was was trending well there. There's a nice article on USA Today about Coach Creighton. I texted Coach last week. I said, we're going to have you on the Knee Jerks. He said, I'm anytime you want me. So we'll try to get Coach Creighton on. Hopefully the team will still be doing well.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the rebirth of that program in Ypsilanti. But right now, no guest scheduled for the 20th. We'll see you on October the 20th. And I want to thank my lovely wife, Sharon, for putting up with this nonsense as she does every other Sunday. And thank you, Big Al, for making Sunday night so gosh darn fun.
And I also want to give a shout-out to Bean for making his bi-weekly appearance.
Audio.
He is such an excitable little dog. All right. I also want to give thank you, Greg, for taking time out of your schedule to talk sports with me, because that's pretty much my only outlet at this point. It's to yell at you for an hour and a half. And give a shout-out to my girlfriend, Linda, who is busy saving lives in the ER as we speak. And again, looking forward to a couple weeks from now to yell about the Lions, yell about the Red Wings, and we'll probably have some Pistons to talk about. As I mentioned earlier, their preseason, I should say, I hate using that term, exhibition season starts tomorrow. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about the Pistons roster, where they're headed. It probably won't be good, but at least give us something to talk about. All right, and I'll also get out there before we go. If you want to listen to the show, if you haven't figured it out yet at this point, we're available on iTunes. Just look for the Knee Jerks, and Big Al. We're also on Stitcher, which is available on pretty much every device out there. It's on the Google Play Store. It's in the Apple App Store. It's available on your computer browser. Just go on your computer browser. Just go to Stitcher.com, sign up, listen to the podcast. That's my preferred podcast listening app of choice. Available everywhere on everything, and we're on YouTube. I just checked my recording, and I don't know what happened. Didn't record video again, so it'll be an audio recording on YouTube. But regardless of that, you want to go to YouTube, you can listen to us there as well. Search the Knee Jerks, Eno and Big Al. There'll be links to all of that in the show notes. But with that, let's get the hell out of here so I can rewind my DVR and see the Mantha goal. So with that, we'll see you 2 weeks from today. So until that time, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao to everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.